So I want to introduce everybody to Attorney John Facil. He's been practicing in the area probably since ERISA was signed in early 70s. He's been a go-to for me for a long time, very knowledgeable. So today's seminar on a topic that's always timely for retirement committees, and we've also got people who, professionally have worked with my group over the years. But today is basically best practices for fiduciary liability and governance for retirement plan committees, and anybody who's part of defined contribution or a defined benefit plan. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate the very kind introduction. What you didn't tell everybody is that I'm actually older than dirt. But anyway, so today I'm going to cover what every 401k committee should know about their fiduciary responsibilities. And as Dave pointed out, I'm going to try to keep this to 25 minutes because I know that you're all juggling a lot. So my goal today is very simple, to give you as much practical guidance as I know about fulfilling your fiduciary responsibilities on your committees. So in 25 minutes, I'm going to try to boil down everything I've learned in nearing 48 years. Let's start with who's a fiduciary, because we're talking about fiduciary responsibilities. Let's talk about who's a fiduciary. This is all based on fact. It's what somebody actually does. It's not what their title is. It's not what they tell their people. Yes or no, I am. It's what you in fact do. So here's how you can be a fiduciary. And I know that if you're on a committee and you're making decisions about service providers, investment providers, other service providers, record keepers, administrators, so on and so forth, that is a fiduciary function. What Dave does, of course, render investment advice at top level for a fee. That makes Corpco a fiduciary to your plan. The third way, if you have a process, a claims process, when someone or someones are responsible for it and making decisions about who gets benefits, who doesn't, has discretion, someone who has discretion to make decisions about benefits, that person's a fiduciary. Now, what's not a fiduciary function? The records, these census records you keep on people's dates of service, their birth dates, so on and so forth, that you turn over to your record keepers, administrators, that's clearly not a fiduciary function. Something else that's not a fiduciary function, what we call settlor responsibilities. The company that makes a decision to have a 401k plan in the first place, that is not a fiduciary decision. Making a decision to change the plan, add whatever features you think is necessary to meet your strategic goals in recruiting and maintaining top level benefits. We know it's a very competitive environment. Hope that the plan is a significant part of that strategy, getting top talent. That is a corporate function, which is not subject to fiduciary rules. This is a very quick rundown of what we're going to cover today. What are my fiduciary responsibilities, governance basics, best practices for committees, what are the focuses of Department of Labor, the IRS, on managing fiduciary responsibilities. Also going to talk about some recent fiduciary plaintiffs' class actions. Supreme Court in 2008 allowed individual participants in a 401k plan to sue, not just on their own behalf, but on behalf of their fellow employees. And I'm going to end this with a checklist on how to reduce fiduciary liability. So if you're a fiduciary, what are you responsible for? ERISA says 5 things. The top 2 are our primary focuses. I mean, we can talk about the fourth, which is a duty to invest in a diversified portfolio of assets. The last one, duty to follow plan documents. That's pretty straightforward, but it's the top 2 that get all the attention. Let's talk about the first, because it is clearly the primary focus of the Department of Labor and the IRS now, as well as plaintiffs' class action firms representing participants. The duty of loyalty, which we call the exclusive benefit rule. It's very simple to state. The sole duty of a fiduciary is to the participants in the plan, no one else, not the company, certainly not officers, certainly not friends of officers, but just the participants. And that duty is very simple to state. It is, in addition to making sure that the plan is managed only for plan participants, the second part of this is what's getting all the attention from the Department of Labor and law firms, plaintiffs' class action law firms. It's to make sure that the administrative costs of the plan is paying for administration, that they are reasonable. They don't have to be the cheapest, but they have to be reasonable. And we'll talk about all kinds of ways that reasonability, which may have begun, may have been started of the plan, may get out of whack. The second, the duty of prudence. This is also very important. It's the prudence of someone who is an expert, someone who is very familiar with all the things that Dave's familiar with, all the things that I'm familiar with, a prudent expert. That's the standard that fiduciaries will be held to. And this is the other very important point. If no one on the committee has that kind of experience, and let's be honest, very few people, very few companies have someone like Dave and Corpco. Very few people have someone like me on staff, and so this is the standard you'll be held to. The standard of a prudent expert. So if you don't have one, it's very easy. In a prudent process, you brought several people in. You asked all of them the same questions. You got a feel for what they could do, how good they do it, got references and all that. Hiring somebody in that capacity on that basis will check that off as discharging a fiduciary duty the right way. From the very beginning, when I was 26 years old, and ERISA was getting started, the framers of ERISA, who were working on this legislation for 5 years, everything, of course, always starts when there are high-level public catastrophes. In this case, it was the demise of the Studebaker Company, the Horn Hardart Company, a couple of other big names, if you're old enough to remember those names. Their blow-ups, bankruptcies, and having thousands and thousands of participants go with nothing really was the genesis for the start of ERISA. At the very beginning, the framers said every plan has to have a named fiduciary and named in the document, so that the thought was that having someone named, someone's named, would give employees a very ready reference on who to go to if they had issues. 6 months after ERISA was enacted in 74, the Department of Labor said, you know what, we know that many plans name the company as a named fiduciary and plan administrator. That's okay. That's fine. We know that. But for internal purposes, again, I think the framers really wanted to enable employees to be able to go to someone and if they had any issues. When you look at all the changes in the law since 74, now closing in on 48 years, there are well over 100 responsibilities that must be managed by fiduciaries. Many of those can be outsourced. That's also created a huge industry. $9 trillion invested in ERISA covered plans. It's like 25% of the economy that we're all talking about. So huge industries have grown up. You can outsource many of these, but it's important to know that with the increased scrutiny of the department, the IRS, and potential for plaintiffs' lawsuits, you have to remember that at the very top, it's you, the committee, that's responsible for everything. And you just can't check off boxes. It's very important that you apply best practices in managing the governance of your plan. So this is a very quick checklist. I think the way to start thinking about this is that, of course, you want to reflect your own internal strengths. Who's got some kind of expertise on investments? That starts generally with CFOs, administration. Typically, that's done by HR, and so you probably want to have those kinds of people on your committee. Some very large plans, our experience, at least 50 million and up, think about having two different committees, one for investments and one for administration. but plans, I think we see, and I know most of you have just one committee, which is fine. Top bullet, obvious. You want to make sure that in your management of fiduciary function, you cover all plans. Many companies we know used to have defined benefit plans, very few anymore. 401k seems to be the way that most people are providing benefits. But you want to make sure you are covering all of your ERISA covered plans. The obvious on the focus, the one that gets most of the attention most of the time is investments, investment performance. It's all very objective. It's all very readily understood. And that tends to be a primary focus of committee management. However, have to remember, you're also responsible for the plan administration as well as legal compliance. The last bullet is what's getting a lot of attention in the last 8 to 10 years. And we'll talk about why and how that's come about. Monitoring, very, very important to understand. And I'll talk about this at the end. The Supreme Court of the United States in 2015 handed down a decision called Tibble. And in that decision, for the first time, the Supreme Court of the United States said what I think was common sense, understood by most people. Committees have a responsibility, ongoing responsibility, to monitor the performance of their providers, including the performance of investments, and more importantly, is where all the attention's going on that duty of loyalty, that duty to make sure that all administrative expenses were no more than reasonable. Best practices for committees. We see 3 to 9. Want to strive for an odd number, obviously, so you don't have ties. 5 to 7 members seems to be the sweet spot, and this is really a function of each company. 5 to 7, I see 5 probably more often than any other. If I thought very quickly about our clients, the primary point here is that whatever you have internally, the backgrounds of your people, finance people, HR people, you want to get the strongest people in on the committee so that you can have the kind of organization you need. Now, diversity of backgrounds is what I think of as the demographic diversity you have in your organization. We know for a fact that every employee who feels that they are represented on the committee feels that much tighter to the plan and the company. And this is the most important, obviously appreciates the strategic value in their lives, in their own work lives, on what you're trying to do as an organization to appeal to the best and the brightest out there for strategic. When people find out that they have individual liability, potential individual liability, I think that gets a lot of attention, probably motivates most people to do what they need to do on the committee. This is very serious legal, business, and financial aspects. And so that, of course, should get attention. You want people who are independent thinkers, what I call smellers, like to chase down issues, have shown, demonstrated a willingness to learn, have innate curiosity. You want people who are actually going to be able to dig in and do the job. We know very, very few people have as a background what kinds of experiences, expertise we have. That's why you hire outsiders like Corpco, but you want people who have the kind of smarts and attitude to take this a bit very seriously and to dig in and be honest, independent, objective decision makers. Look, we also know, this is the last point, we know that human nature being what it is, we know that people try to spell out what the boss wants and to vote that way. No, kind of human characteristics that we're talking about, what I call just basic courage, courage of convictions, to do what and to vote in decision process what is in the best interests of the plan. Again, back to fiduciary duties and who's a fiduciary. I've made this next point about engagement of experts to cover areas that members aren't really equipped to manage prudently. That's an extremely important reminder. And as I said before, I think what's equally important is that the process of engaging experts has to be done in a prudent way. What's a prudent way? It includes, of course, getting recommendations, going to all your networks, and getting names of different alternatives for each service, and then to have a process in which you evaluate in a very common sense, prudent way, who's the best to serve your needs. Sometimes that's done through an RFP process. 10 vendors, 3 finalists, read through gazillion pages of proposals, and then have everybody in 2022 meet is, of course, by Zoom, and get a real feel for what everybody can do. Remember, of course, that the committee is completely accountable for all actions. Now, nothing in the law has ever required a charter. So per se, it's not required, but for the reasons I'm going to go into the next several pages, you'll see why having one is a really good idea. Again, this is really the main point here. Remember the responsibility of fiduciaries to manage the plan solely in the best interest of plan participants, to make sure that only reasonable expenses are paid, and to manage based on the standard of a prudent expert. Same rules apply on governance. So a plan that operates without at least a coherent governance structure, maybe not reduced to a charter, but have a committee that has no real standards on how the committee is going to operate, is obviously vulnerable to mismanagement, inconsistent performance, and potential liabilities. And so we'll see on next slide how a sound committee structure can help minimize liability and maximize value for the strategic purposes you have a plan. Enhancement. Consider this slide an itemized checklist of how to make sure the plan and the significant money you're investing in it maximize your strategic promise to your employees, to your owners, and this is what I consider a basic checklist on how to make sure you accomplish all those objectives. Who's on it? How it's structured? Who are members? How you're going to be able to delegate authority for various functions. In terms of responsibilities, we often see the obvious that typically finance is more responsible, more accountable for investments. Oftentimes we see HR people who are fully fluent in all that. Typically we see HR people responsible for administration. In terms of meetings, I think having a couple of meetings a year, every 6 months, is a minimum. And I know a lot of companies, bigger companies especially, are going to 4 meetings a year. Lastly, this is important. Again, going back to that duty of loyalty, it's very important to have a process to ensure you can identify potential conflicts of interest, and to make sure that they are dealt with, and to make sure that they are eliminated, because conflicts of interest, again, managing the plan for anybody but the employees is a no-no. And the anybody but can certainly include service providers, and we'll get into that. All right, let's talk about minutes. This is the really important thing to understand. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen. So it's very important to provide a record on, and this is the next point, really down on the Goldilocks standard. It's not too much, it's not too little. It's a very brief summary of the issue, that the pros and cons, ins and outs were discussed. It doesn't have to be who voted which way, who voted that way. It's that it was discussed, and the decision was made after a thorough discussion, and the decision was as follows. That's all I really need to say about minutes. Let's go to the next slide. Let's consider this, how to enhance or improve committee meetings. I think it starts with smart logistics, making sure that your service providers are going to email their reports well in advance of meetings. Make sure that you circulate in advance all those reports, and of course to make sure that individual members of the committee are going to be able to make the next meeting. Very, very important. Smart logistics. I think this is really again, just call this a checklist on how to run meetings. Consider this an agenda. Last meeting minutes, macro picture analysis, all financial activity reviewed, any developments in the law, either IRS related, congressional related department, so on and so forth, impact on the plan, any discussion about plan amendments. Of course, the one that gets attention is review of investment performance, and developing, if there is a bad fund, to keep a lookout for a watch list, and then to deal with that as necessary. Of course, training sessions like this, I think you should do these annually. And the last point I think is very important that I want to make. In your meetings, at least annually, you need to benchmark plan expenses. Very important to remember that. And I think Corpco is doing that for you annually. At least benchmarking is good. Going out with an RFP maybe every 3 years. The Department of Labor says at least every 3 years. But that's another matter. Not annually, 3 years. 5 years is probably okay too. Remember this. This is really important about committee governance. In terms of performance, you do not have to be top 10%. You don't have to be average. You can be below average as long as you have a rationale that you document on why you chose to do what you did. Very simple. And in terms of expenses, you do not have to have the cheapest providers. It's all about value, what you get for what you pay. Let's go to the next slide very quickly. We can cover this in a minute. So I've talked about all the ways that good committees do things the right way. This is a very quick checklist from the opposite end, how you can get into trouble, not having a committee. A lot of plans, a lot of companies don't even have a committee. If you have a committee and you have established protocols, I'm sure Corpco is helping you out with those. If you don't follow those, that's as bad as not having a committee. Not meeting when you're supposed to, not keeping minutes, so on and so forth. Investment policy statement probably gets more attention than it deserves, but we know most companies have one. Probably thanks to Corpco, you have one, but make sure you follow it. If you don't follow it, that's probably more trouble than not even having one. And of course, if you have a discussion about bad funds, you probably want to make sure that you remove those, again, in a way that your investment advisor tells you to. The Supreme Court is called fiduciary liabilities cases. 2008, Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Roberts, author of the decision in the LaRue case, established 34 years after ERISA was enacted that individual employees could sue not only on their own behalf, that was the rule for the first 34 years, but could sue on behalf of all of their fellow employees, fellow participants in the plan. Overnight, a class action industry was created. That's the beginning, 2008. 2015, the Supreme Court announced, again, this is the only other decision in the history of ERISA in which the Supreme Court of the United States rendered an opinion. This is the Tibble case. And what it says in 9 very condensed pages is what is very clear common sense. Committees have a fiduciary responsibility to their plan participants to make sure that they monitor all plan investments and on a regular basis. Yeah, it doesn't have to be quarterly, it doesn't even have to be semi-annually. On a regular basis, at least annually, to monitor their performance of investments, and in bold, especially, this was the subject of the Tibble case, to make sure that the impact of the investments on plan expenses is also monitored on a regular basis. And what happened in this Tibble case is that a huge company, Consolidated Edison, made decisions in the beginning of its 401k plan 40 years ago to have retail based investment classes, highest charge. Plan grew to over $1 billion. Amazing. They still had retail class shares in their portfolio. Supreme Court said, no, not good. You need to monitor that, and you need to get you need to take the advice of your providers or ask them, are there cheaper alternatives? And the answer, of course, would have been yes. At $1 billion, that they were eligible for institutional class shares in every case. So let's go to the last. The law firm out in St. Louis, called Schleicher Bogart, they were the first ones to jump on the LaRue case. And overnight, they invented what we lawyers call a class action industry. ERISA plan class actions. They sued 50 different companies. It's very easy. They get online, they look at 5500s, and they see all the expenses there in the schedules on the 5500s, and they go after the biggest fruit. These are mostly big plans, probably 100 million, 200 million and up. I don't know if there's anyone on the call who's in that category. $1 billion plans made a significant number of significant settlements. This is just a quick list. Of course, they were involved in the Tibble case. Tussey versus ASEA Brown Boveri, another $1 billion plan, got way out of whack. Lockheed Martin and in Cambridge, Massachusetts, our own MIT. You can see the very last, that law firm out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that brought the last two actions that are focused right here in Massachusetts. South Coast Hospitals had about $150 million in their plan, and I know that Schleicher Bogart got us, or this is called the Gabriel and Mullen plan, class action firm. They got a $2 million settlement, and the Mass General Brigham plan, which is well over $1 billion, is in process. But I'm sure that they're going to settle, and it's going to be for a significant amount of money.
Well done, John, and I will thank you all for being a good audience, and wish you a good day. Take care.
Thank you.